Pluto in the 8th house is one of the most potent and philosophically at-home positions in a natal chart. Because Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio, which is naturally associated with the 8th house, this placement functions with a raw, concentrated intensity. It represents a life path defined by the cycle of death and rebirth, where the soul's evolution is fast-tracked through profound psychological excavations and the navigation of high-stakes shared resources. The architecture of the underworld. To understand Pluto in the 8th, one must first view the 8th house as the engine room of the psyche. It governs the things we merge with others: sex, deep intimacy, inheritance, taxes, and the occult. When Pluto resides here, the individual is born with an innate X-ray vision. There is a fundamental refusal to accept things at face value. Whether it is a social interaction or a financial contract, the native feels a compulsive need to strip away the surface layers to find the core truth hiding underneath. This creates a personality that is often seen as magnetic, secretive, and incredibly resilient. You likely possess an aura of quiet power that can be both alluring and intimidating to others. There is a still waters run deep quality here. While you may appear composed on the surface, there is an intense emotional and psychic processing happening at all times. The alchemy of intimacy and trust. In the realm of relationships, Pluto in the 8th house seeks nothing less than total soul merging. This is not the house of casual dating or light-hearted flirtation, it is the house of until death do us part and beyond. The challenge here is the struggle between a desperate craving for intimacy and a profound fear of betrayal. Because you understand the power of vulnerability, you may guard your inner self with high walls. However, once you choose to let someone in, the transformation is absolute. Relationships often serve as the primary catalyst for your personal growth. You might find yourself drawn to taboo subjects or partners who challenge your boundaries, forcing you to confront your own shadows. The lesson here is learning to surrender control. Pluto in the 8th often fears being controlled by others, yet the path to healing involves realizing that true power comes from emotional transparency rather than defensive maneuvering. Shared resources and the power of rebirth. On a more material level, the 8th house governs other people's money. Pluto here can manifest as significant fluctuations in wealth through inheritances, settlements, or complex financial partnerships. There is often a phoenix quality to your finances. You may experience moments where everything is stripped away, only to rebuild something far more powerful and sustainable from the ashes. This placement also grants a natural talent for psychology, research, or any field that requires digging up secrets. You have the stomach for the darker sides of life that others might turn away from: crisis management, forensic investigation, or deep-seated trauma healing. You are the person others call when things fall apart, because you are not afraid of the chaos. The evolutionary intent. Ultimately, the goal of Pluto in the 8th house is transmutation. You are tasked with taking the lead of human experience, pain, loss, and fear, and turning it into the gold of wisdom and empowerment. You are a natural alchemist of the spirit. Throughout your life, you will likely undergo several mini-deaths where an old version of your identity must be shed to make room for a more authentic self. These periods can feel like a descent into the underworld, but they are necessary for your evolution. By mastering the 8th house themes of trust, power, and surrender, you move from a state of being driven by your unconscious impulses to a state of conscious mastery over your destiny. You learn that death, whether literal or symbolic, is never an end, but a gateway to a higher level of being. Building on that foundation, we can look deeper into the specific psychological mechanics and the occult or hidden dimensions of Pluto in the 8th house. This placement doesn't just suggest intensity, it demands a total psychological overhaul that occurs over several distinct chapters of the native's life. The psychological sentinel and the shadow. With Pluto in its home house, there is often a heightened sensitivity to the collective shadow. You don't just notice your own secrets, you are hyper-aware of the secrets of everyone in the room. This can lead to a form of psychic exhaustion if boundaries aren't established. From a young age, many with this placement feel like they are carrying an invisible weight or a sense of knowing things that shouldn't be known. The 8th house is where we deal with the things society prefers to keep behind closed doors. Because Pluto thrives in this darkness, you may find that you are the taboo breaker in your family or social circle. You are the one who asks the uncomfortable questions during dinner or the one who refuses to ignore the elephant in the room. While this can cause friction, it is also your greatest gift. You act as a catalyst for truth, forcing others to confront the reality they are trying to suppress. Power dynamics and the control vulnerability paradox. One of the most complex expressions of this placement is the struggle for power within intimate unions. Because the 8th house represents the merging of two entities, Pluto here creates a fear of being swallowed or manipulated. This often manifests in two ways. The controller, seeking to maintain total dominance over shared finances, sexual dynamics, or emotional information to ensure they can never be blindsided. The renunciant, avoiding deep commitments entirely to prevent the possibility of being controlled by another. The evolution of Pluto in the 8th involves moving toward interdependence. This is the realization that true power isn't the ability to dominate others, but the ability to remain centered and whole even when you are at your most vulnerable. You are learning that letting go is not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate act of strength. The healer's path, from trauma to transcendence. There is a significant link between Pluto in the 8th and the wounded healer archetype. You may have experienced early life events that felt like a loss of innocence, forcing you to develop survival mechanisms far earlier than your peers. However, these scars become your credentials. In your later years, this placement often points toward a career or a calling in the liminal spaces, hospice care, deep tissue bodywork, crisis counseling, or even high-level shadow work. You have the rare ability to sit with someone in their darkest hour without flinching. Because you have navigated your own internal underworld, you can serve as a guide for others who are lost in theirs. The occult and the unseen. Finally, Pluto in the 8th house often grants a fascination with, or a natural talent for, the metaphysical. This isn't just interest in the occult, it is often a visceral connection to the veil between life and death. You may experience vivid, prophetic dreams, or find yourself naturally adept at reading energy and intent. The lesson here is to use this hidden knowledge ethically. There is a temptation with Pluto to use one's insights to manipulate outcomes, but the highest vibration of this placement is to use that insight to liberate oneself and others from the chains of the past. You are ultimately learning that the only thing that truly dies is the ego, while the essence of the soul remains indestructible, eternally renewing itself through every crisis. While a natal placement is a lifelong operating system, a Pluto transit through the 8th house is a singular, multi-decade era of initiation. Because Pluto moves so slowly, this transit often lasts between 12 and 20 years, marking a massive epoch of your life where the universe demands you pay the piper, psychologically, financially, and karmically. It is a period where you are systematically stripped of your dependencies so that you may find your own indestructible core. The financial purgative, debt and inheritance. On a mundane level, Pluto transiting the 8th house often triggers a total restructuring of your relationship with shared resources. This isn't just about your bank account, it's about the power dynamics tied to money. You may face significant issues regarding debt, taxes, or the resources of others. For some, this transit brings a death of financial stability that forces a radical rebirth, perhaps a bankruptcy that leads to a more empowered way of handling money, or a complex inheritance that comes with heavy emotional strings attached. The lesson here is financial autonomy. Pluto will often collapse any situation where you are being controlled by someone else's money, or vice versa, forcing you to build a foundation that is truly your own. The psychological excavation, facing the shadow. The 8th house is the house of the subconscious basement, and Pluto is the cosmic investigator. During this transit, you can expect long-buried traumas, secrets, or family ghosts to emerge into the light. This is rarely comfortable. It often feels like a dark night of the soul where you are forced to confront the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime ignoring, your obsessions, your fears of abandonment, and your desire for control. However, the cleaning out of these psychological pipes is what allows for true healing. You may find yourself drawn to deep therapy, shadow work, or the occult during this time. You aren't just learning about yourself, you are undergoing a spiritual detox. By the time Pluto leaves this house, you will likely feel like a completely different person, one who is no longer haunted by the past because you have finally looked the ghosts in the eye and demanded they speak. The transformation of intimacy, sex and soul merging. Because the 8th house governs sex and deep bonds, Pluto's transit here acts like a high-pressure furnace for your relationships. Casual connections will likely wither or explode. This transit demands authenticity. If you are in a relationship based on power struggles, manipulation, or superficiality, Pluto will bring those issues to a head. Sexual expression often undergoes a total metamorphosis during this time. It moves away from the physical and toward the transformative. You may experience encounters that feel fated or karmic, serving as mirrors for your own internal evolution. You are learning the difference between attachment, which is based on fear, and intimacy, which is based on trust. You are being asked to die to the old ways of relating so you can be reborn into a partnership that is a true union of equals. The Phoenix Rising, the final integration. The most profound gift of a Pluto transit through the 8th house is the realization of your own resilience. By the end of this long journey, you will have seen the worst of what life and your own psyche can throw at you, and you will still be standing. You emerge from this transit with the power of the dead. In many traditions, the initiate must figuratively die to be reborn as a master. This transit is that initiation. You lose your fear of change because you have mastered the art of the mini-death. You no longer fear the dark, because you have become a light that can shine within it. You leave this transit with a profound sense of personal authority, having traded your fragile ego defenses for a soul that is tempered, toughened, and truly empowered. Subscribe, like, and share.